Good afternoon, everyone. It's June 5th at 5 o'clock, and we're going to start our county board meeting here. And so I'm going to call our St. Croix County Board of Supervisors to order. And at this time, we'll stand, please, and have a moment of silence. Thank you. Now, if you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Cindy. Linda's excused, Cindy. Thank you. And now we're open for public comment for anything on or off the agenda. And just remember, it's a 3-minute limit to time. So at this time, we will move forward with that. And first one on the agenda is Steve Schala. If he wants to come up.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Stephen Schala. I'm from Bomaz Farms in the town of Pleasant Valley. Some of you know my brother-in-law, Tom Zwald, who worked on the water study group. I wanted to just stop by tonight. In Wisconsin, we have a tradition of June Dairy Month, and so I wanted to wish you happy June Dairy Month and bring you a little tray of cheese to enjoy. The June Dairy Month is about honoring our farming and dairy heritage and looking forward to a bright future. I'm sure many of you have farming in your family background, but more and more it's farther removed. However, many of the values and traditions still get passed down. Values of hard work, responsibility, cooperation, compassion for animals, and appreciation of the land and our natural resources, and helping our neighbors when they're broke down. Dairy is still a big deal in St. Croix County. 2015 USDA data showed that there were over 18,000 dairy cows on 159 dairy farms in our county, generating over $107 million in milk sales. Agriculture in St. Croix County provides almost 3,700 jobs, and not including property taxes to local schools, contributed $8.6 million in taxes. Dairy farming has also gone through a large amount of change in the last decade or two. The number of farms has declined, and the general size of farms is increasing. But the important measures are still the same. The farms are still family-owned and operated, and the values of our families are strong. Our commitment to the care of our cattle and land has never been stronger. Our family and many others around the county would welcome any questions you have and would happy to be a resource for you. And we'd love to host you for a tour at the farm anytime. Never hesitate to reach out to us. Many counties around the state host a dairy breakfast to mark June Dairy Month. Our celebration predates that tradition. If you've never been to Farm City Day, I greatly encourage you to attend. This year's event will be August 18th, hosted by the Johnson family, who dairy farm near Baldwin. Please save the date, and I'll probably come back in August with all the details. So I hope you enjoy some cheese, and thank you for all you do for the dairy and farming families of the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. The next person we have is Darla Myers. She wants to step up.
Darla Myers, 1098 Golden Oaks Lane in Hudson. In the article, Radical Evil Posing as Good by John Vinson, he states, the Southern Poverty Law Center employs strategies and tactics that bewilder and outrage many good and decent people. It poses as a source of moral authority, but while it endorses tolerance, its spokesmen are quick to slap harsh and dehumanizing labels on anyone who dares to disagree with their dogmas. These labels are quite often arbitrary and totally disproportionate to anything the offending parties have said or done. A prime example is the term hate group, which the SPLC applies to organizations it wishes to stigmatize. It's a term with a powerful emotional punch, and to the average person, it suggests a violent law-breaking group, one that consistently uses defaming language against its targets. Some of the SPLC's designated haters may fit this description, but most do not. The label of hate group, says the SPLC with breathtaking dishonesty, does not imply that the group is criminally inclined or violent, but that's precisely what it suggests, and that's why the SPLC sends its hate group misinformation to law enforcement agencies across the country. By this action, the SPLC surely implies that these groups deserve oversight by police agencies. The organization's desire to influence police is ironic given its endorsement of terror bomber Bill Ayers, a self-described militant communist and ex-fugitive, as a Weather Underground domestic terrorist. The SPLC's ruthless and hardball stance against its targets is consistent with the strategy outlined by former SPLC spokesman Mark Potok. He declared, sometimes the press will describe us as monitoring hate groups and so on. I want to say that our aim in life is to destroy these groups, to completely destroy them. Many critics of the SPLC have charged it with hypocrisy, as it claims to promote tolerance while seeking to marginalize and even destroy dissenting views. Tony Bull is quoted as saying, as our community works with our local police and city officials, it has become apparent that we need to also seek assistance from outside agencies and support systems. Hudson individuals that experience prejudicial actions or hate crimes will be encouraged to also contact state and federal organizations that are not influenced by those that align with Citizens for the St. Croix Valley. Bull's statement is a mirror image of Potok's statement. The First Amendment states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Thank you.
Thank you, Darrell. Public comment still open if there's anybody else that has a public comment for anything on or off the agenda. Anybody else have something for public comment? Anyone else have something for public comment? Not seeing anybody, we'll move on with our agenda. Thank you. The next, we have a consent agenda. Minutes for our previous meetings from April 10th and May 1st. The next date for our next meeting will be August 7th. And alteration of county supervisor district lines due to, and there's nothing in there, nothing on rezoning, so I need a motion to approve. Supervisor Peavy, second. Supervisor Brinkman, any discussion? Not seeing any discussion, we will vote on that. That's all yeses. Thank you. Presentation and recognition. Turn it over to child support.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'd like to introduce Lisa Plunkett to the county board. When her appointment was confirmed as the new child support director, she had asked to take a long needed vacation, and so the evening when we confirmed her appointment, she wasn't actually here. So along with the introduction of this award for the child support agency, I would like to formally introduce Lisa Plunkett as the new administrator for the Child Support Agency. I have a letter here from the state director of child support agencies, and it's addressed to Ms. Plunkett. Congratulations, Ms. Plunkett, and to the Child Support Agency to the St. Croix County Child Support Agency for receiving the Federal Fiscal Year 2017 Certificate of Excellence Award. The St. Croix County Child Support Agency has demonstrated excellence in all 4 performance measures. These are paternity establishment, court order establishment, current support collections, and arrears case reductions. The benchmarks that the state uses are for paternity establishment rate 90% or greater, court order establishment 80% or greater, collection rate on current support 80% or greater, arrears case collections rate 80% or greater. Your agency was one of 17 child support agencies throughout the state of Wisconsin honored with this award during the 2018 State Directors Conference on April 19th. Congratulations on this exceptional accomplishment. On behalf of Wisconsin's children, thank you for a job well done. I'd also like to thank Chad Wolski, who was the prior administrator for the Child Support Agency, and Lisa Plunkett has been with the department for about 12, 13 years and has been recently promoted to the position of administrator. So thank you to Chad and to Lisa and to all the child support agency workers. Some of them are here this evening. I'd like to thank all of them for their hard work, and I'll call Lisa Plunkett up to the podium to present this award, and she might have a few words for us. Thank you, Lisa. Congratulations. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that this is our 4th year in getting the Excellence Award. Hopefully we can increase our performance a little bit more to get a higher award. That's what we always like to see. I have Chad Wolski here with me, Gretchen Murado, Lisa DeWall, and Heather Jensen. They're all part of the staff. We wouldn't be here getting this award if it wasn't for everyone, including our Corp Council that assists us in establishing support and orders. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. We'll move on to our St. Croix County Sportsman's Alliance report from Buck Malik, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, supervisors. Good to see you again. Been a year, I guess. Time for the annual report. I provided a page authored by Mike Ryder and myself, but I thought I would also just give you a list of recent activities of the Sportsman's Alliance in support of things happening in this county. In just the recent year or so, we provided $500 to the Glen Hills Park for fishing prizes. We provided a tree planter for tree planting in the county, gave 3 annual $500 scholarships for area conservation students who are going to tech school or college in a conservation field. Sponsored annual kids' summer and winter fishing contests and other fishing demonstrations around the county. Mentored classes of students for New Richmond High School Service Day. Provided funds for the Hudson Rod and Gun Club to purchase and release adult rooster pheasants prior to the pheasant hunting season on a 1-to-1 match basis. Provided starter batches of herbicide for invasive plant control in the county. And those of you, I might just mention at this point, who are perhaps wrestling with buckthorn, which is not named after me, but buckthorn. That's one of our most popular requests, is for a small sample, starter batch of herbicide and instructions. We have a fellow who does that. We gave funds for mounts and tan skins for educational and display purposes. provided conservation aids project money for access and habitat work on the Kinnickinnick River at the Red Cabin site and on the Willow River at the Nature Center in New Richmond. Provided money to the Friends of the St. Croix Wetland Management District, Star Prairie Fish and Game Association, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for their Ducks on a Stick education project and the Oak Ridge WPA observation platform. Supported Glen Park, the county park of course, with fish crib placement. Supported Bass Lake habitat work in the county water activities volunteers program. Promoted the St. Croix County deer donation program. Provided funds for repair of the aeration system on Squaw Lake. Obtained a grant for $5,000 and drilled a monitoring well at the Erin Prairie Town Hall. That looked like a worthy project to advance that cause that your study group worked on. Dan was involved with respect to understanding better the relationship between surface water and groundwater and areas of recharge, a complex subject, but it appears there need to be some more wells, so we at least got one there at the Erin Prairie Town Hall. Hopefully that will provide a good pilot project that can be replicated in other strategic places. We sponsored a youth duck ID and hunting clinic at the Willow River Rod and Gun Club, and we reimbursed some of the expenses of the Conservation Congress delegates. I'm happy to answer any questions, or try at least. If you have any questions for me.
Supervisor Schoberg, go ahead.
Yeah, Buck, the source of funds, is it coming from the state or from license fees or?
On some we have matching grants, the county aids projects. Every county is given an allocation based on its population, and the county has to match it. That gets us about $6,000, that state appropriation, and out of fishing fees. Fishing license fees, and the county match, and that's usually not enough to do a whole project. So the rest we solicit from sports clubs, individuals, businesses, any place we can get it. We put on an annual banquet, and that way we charge ourselves, you know, for the fun of eating together and entering into raffles, and we make around $3,000 a year that way. Generally, we're not talking about large amounts, but a lot of it is in-kind work too. Just getting out there with muscles, even old muscles.
Any other questions for Buck? Supervisor Hanson.
Sir, would you talk about the educational work that's done?
Is someone here who should be
Oh, I'm
addressed
sorry.
as
I
sir?
thought your dad was back there.
Yeah.
Buck, would you talk about the educational work that the Alliance does, going to schools and the Ducks on a Stick? You mentioned that very quickly, but it's pretty darn neat.
Yeah, you know, if you haven't yet seen the Ducks on a Stick, it's a paradigm that was invented by the Fish and Wildlife Service about 20 years ago to mount ducks that have been either shot for the purpose and then turned over to a taxidermist or been hit by cars or otherwise died. So there are duck carcasses, and then they are mounted with one wing extended and the other wing folded back, and a dowel inserted through the body so that they can be stood up, and they can be transported without taking too much space in a car or truck, you know, and they can be stood up on tabletops and whatnot, and people can get close to them. You know, it's relatively rare for non-hunters to actually be able to touch a duck. So it's an extremely popular exhibit with kids, and then you can get talking with them about the gender differences and the size differences and all those immense color differences of the beaks and the feet and the roll of the webbing, and why some have feathery feet and others don't, and so on. So the Ducks on a Stick is a very popular exhibit. Mike Ryder has his own personal collection and goes around and talks to school groups anywhere he can get an audience, and so he's been in, I'm sure, every school in this county over the last 20 years at least once, and with many of them he returns. He applied for and got a grant so he could buy some educational booklets that he could leave behind, and he found some high-quality booklets, so he leaves something with every teacher. If the teacher really takes an interest, then Michael prepare a skull for them. He has folks who collect roadkill for him, and he boils the meat off, you know, and makes exhibits out of them. It's all pretty fascinating for kids from, I don't know, 9 to 99. I don't know, whatever. For all of us, it's fascinating, the natural world. And as the previous gentleman farmer was saying, we're just getting farther away from the real world. And so the Sportsman's Alliance is a group of people who try to do something about that. I like to think that our kids' fishing events reach out to single-family parents who don't have an angling background, who feel uncomfortable, who think there's some magic about fishing, and they're afraid to go, and they're afraid to look foolish in front of other people and all that. Well, we've assembled a group of mentors, grandfatherly types for the most part, but we're delighted to have some great women. Agnes Ring was a regular for many years, who come and show us that fishing knows no gender, and it's easy to learn and fun. Yeah. So there's a lot of ways to educate, and we're delighted to do it, sort of on your behalf. I guess. If you want to get personally involved, just provide me an email address, and I'll put you on the loop. But I know you're busy.
Supervisor Peterson.
I'd just like to express my thanks. I know you do a lot of volunteer time, and it's really neat to have an advocate for our environment. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just a lucky guy.
Yep.
Blessed with good health. And
Any other
grandkids.
questions for
So,
Buck at this time? Dan?
I'd just point out, when we took a look at the projects that have been done by, throughout the county, environmental projects, water quality projects, the Sportsman's Alliance has been involved with, what would you say percent-wise? When we took a tally of things that have been done over the last 5 years.
oh, almost all, I'd say, Dan, in some way or other, a coordinating role of somebody volunteering something, providing information.
We had a consultant at our when we were redoing our help me, Buck, what was it?
Oh, that plan, that
Yeah, the
soil and water plan?
Soil and water plan. When we redid
Yeah.
our soil and water plan, it became evident the impact that this organization of volunteers, and I would bet that more than half the people sitting at this table belong to a rod and gun club or a sportsman club, and we all contribute. And I'm just darn proud to know you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time. See you again
Anybody
next
else?
year.
Thank you, Buck. Appreciate it. We'll move on to appointments. We'll turn it over to our county administrator, Pat Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These are the annual or every other year appointments that the county administrator needs to make. I'm going to run through this list, and if you have questions afterwards, you can certainly contact me, and I'll provide this list to the clerk as well. The first appointment is to the Health and Human Services Board. This is the citizen appointment that was held over from last month. As you recall, we needed to find a physician to replace Dr. Ramsey. I'd like to recommend the appointment. I'm going to run through all these appointments, and then you can vote on them as a group at the end. And if you want to pull some out, that's fine. Dr. Paul McGinnis, Hudson physician, to fill out the term of Dr. Ramsey, so that'll be a one-year appointment. She had 1 year left in her term for the Health and Human Services Board, Dr. Paul McGinnis. The second appointment is to the Board of Adjustment, and these are, one is a citizen appointment, a reappointment of Dave Nickum. That's for a term of 3 years. So he's a citizen member of the Board of Adjustment. Then we have two alternates to the Board of Adjustment. I'd like to recommend the reappointment of Joe Miller as the first alternate to the Board of Adjustment for a term of 3 years, and as the second alternative citizen appointment, Steve Shalla. Steve was here earlier this evening from the town of Pleasant Valley. He will be the second alternate for a term of 3 years on the Board of Adjustment. The County Traffic Safety Commission, and these names were provided by Captain Klatt in the Sheriff's Office, who coordinates the Traffic Safety Commission. Recommend the appointment of Mike Niskas, District Attorney, to represent the discipline of law. J.R. Dockel, who is the principal of and Director of Transportation for the Baldwin Woodville School District, to represent the discipline of education. Matt Melby, who is the Director of the New Richmond Area Ambulance and Rescue Service, to represent the discipline of medicine. Natasha Cardinal, Emergency Management Manager. Supervisor Bill Peavy, who will represent the Transportation Committee. Supervisor Bob Fiedler, who will represent the Public Protection and Judiciary Committee. And former Highway Commissioner Tim Ramberg as a citizen member for the County Traffic Safety Commission. The next committee is the Land Information Advisory Council. Recommend the appointment of Supervisor Dan Hansen from the Community Development Committee. The next appointment would be for the Bass Lake Rehabilitation District. Recommending the appointment of District 3 Supervisor Linda Miller. Next appointment would be for the Hudson Area Intergovernmental Advisory Committee. Recommending the appointment of Chair Roger Larson. The next appointment would be the Partnership Team of the Lower St. Croix Management. Recommending the appointment of Supervisor Roy Schoberg. The next appointments are for the Ad Hoc Transportation Space Needs Facility Planning Committee. Recommend the appointment of Supervisor Bill Peavy as Chair, Supervisor Dave Peterson, Vice Chair, Supervisor Judy Ochterhoff, Supervisor Paulette Anderson, Supervisor Scott Nordstrand, Citizen Member Scott Counter, and Citizen Member Jerry Van Sumeren. Next committee is the Squaw Lake Rehabilitation District, recommending the appointment of Chairman Roger Larson, District 11. Next appointment is to the St. Croix County Economic Development Corporation, recommending the appointment of Supervisor Dave Osnes, Supervisor Robert Fiedler, and the district supervisor from District 13, who will be either Supervisor Ard or Supervisor Shirley, yet to be determined. The next appointment is to the St. Croix County Fair Board, recommending the appointment of Supervisor Judy Ochterhoff, Supervisor Linda Miller, and Supervisor Dan Hansen to the Fair Board. The next appointment is to the West Central Area Land and Water Conservation Association, recommending the appointment of Supervisor Roy Schoberg. Next appointment is to the West Central Wisconsin Community Action Agency, WestCap, recommending the appointment of Supervisor Dave Osnes. The next appointments are to the West Central Regional Planning Commission, recommending the appointment of Supervisor Dan Hansen, Supervisor Judy Ochterhoff, and citizen member Larry Wiesenbeck to the West Central Regional Planning Commission. Next appointment is to the West Central Wisconsin Workforce Development Area, recommending the appointment of Chair Roger Larson. Next appointment is to the Wisconsin Gateway Corridor Coalition, recommending the appointment of Supervisor Dave Osnes. The next appointments are to the newly created Transit Commission, and these are staggered terms. I will start with the 3-year appointments and then go to 2 and 1 year. For the 3-year appointments, recommending the appointment of Blake Fry from the Hudson Chamber of Commerce, Peg Gagnon from the Bridge for Community Life, Julie Bergstrom from the City of River Falls for a 3-year term. For a 2-year term, recommending the appointment of County Board Supervisor Dave Osnes, County Board Supervisor Paulette Anderson, and County Board Supervisor Dave Peterson, 2-year term. And then 1-year appointments. This commission needs to be made up of 3 county board supervisors and 6 citizen members, all for staggered terms. So the 1-year appointment, citizen Sari Lieber from the City of New Richmond, Jacqueline Nickum from the City of River Falls, and Julie Dillon from the City of Hudson, 1-year appointments as citizen members. Getting down here now, almost done. The next is the Willow River Rehabilitation District, recommending the appointment of Supervisor Dan Hansen. And then lastly, to the Wisconsin Counties Association, that's usually typically the chair and vice chair of the board, recommending the appointment of Supervisor Chair Larson and Vice Chair Osnes. That's it.
We have a motion to approve. Supervisor Peterson, second. Supervisor Osnes. Any discussion on that large list? Not seeing any discussion? Supervisor Ochterhoff.
Just one, are these going to be in the minutes so that we'll know who's on which committees?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
No other discussion? Well, Supervisor Tatum.
I do have a question about Dr. McGinnis. How long is that term then that he has to fill?
It's 1 year.
1 year left, okay.
Yeah, he's filling out the term of Dr. Ramsey, who had a 3-year term, but she resigned.
Okay.
Yep.
We have a motion and a second. I don't see any other discussions. We'll vote. That was all yeses. Thank you. Next one I have is the County Library Committee. So I've got a list of people here, not as long as Pat's, so we're okay. I have Judy Ochterhoff from the County Board, Roy Schoberg from the County Board, Tina Norris from the Hudson Area Public Library, has a large library, Krista Coleman from Hazel Mackin Library in Roberts, Barb Kruger from Deer Park Library for small library, and Dennis Duckworth, citizen member. I have one other citizen member I don't have yet. I'm still working on that member, so when I get that, I'll bring it back to the county board. Sometimes they're hard to get, so if anybody has an idea, just pass them through to me and I'll appreciate that, but been talking about it, so I need a motion to approve. Supervisor Peavy, second. Supervisor Hanson, any discussion? Not seeing any discussion, we'll vote.
Need a second.
Did we get the motions? There we go. And that's all yeses. Thank you. Now we'll move down to our annual department reports. First one's Information IT Department for John Allegro.
Good evening. 2017 was another productive year for the IT department at St. Croix County. We were able to complete initiatives that were started in 2016 and start working on projects that were funded in the 2017 budget cycle. Some of our efforts are outlined in my annual report, which is included in your packet. If you have any questions on these projects, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
I have a question.
Supervisors.
You referenced the department budget status, and then there's a small item for revenues.
Yeah.
I was just kind of curious as to what's the source of that revenue?
So we're not generally a revenue-producing
Right.
department.
Mhm.
So we charge back law enforcement agencies and municipalities for licensing to get into our law enforcement and dispatch system. And
I
that's
see.
typically what they are. It includes access to, remote access to our environment, which is Citrix here.
Okay.
So it's minimal, but it's something we recoup. Our annual costs right now are upwards of $140,000 to maintain the software for that system. So we get back about 20% of that.
Supervisor Schoberg.
You want to comment on the GDPR implications that you're unsure about?
Sure. Is everybody here aware of what GDPR is? Okay, it's the European General Data Protection Regulation, and what that does is provides protection to European Union citizens on how their data is bought, sold, and traded. And there's speculation right now that the European Union could uphold some of the GDPR regulations in U.S. court or world court, anywhere. And we're not sure how that's going to work. If we have citizens that own property in St. Croix County, we need to start protecting their data. And I'm unsure of how that works. I've sat in on a few webinars on it that say there could be implications for state and local and tribal agencies on that, but there's no case law. So until we get there, and there is some case law, and we find out whether or not the EU is actually going to be trying some of these cases outside of the European Union, we don't know what's going to happen. It also has implications for law enforcement that are trying to track down cyber criminals, because now there's a global database called Whois, which gives you owner information for every website that's ever been registered. That information is now blanked out because of the GDPR. So our law enforcement can't go and look up who owns a website that may be doing malicious things. So that kind of stifles their efforts at this point. And they don't have a system in place to circumvent that, or if it's a US registered entity and we have full access, we should have full access to that, they don't have two separate systems to maintain that data. So right now, law enforcement has kind of got their hands tied. So it's brand new. It started around May 19th, I think, and we're unsure what's going to come with that.
Any other questions? Supervisor Hanson.
On the ERP, have you started the phase 2, and is the hiccup with Oracle been resolved?
Phase 2 is being worked on right now. They're developing it. I'm not as closely tied to the project as I was with Phase 1, so I don't have details on it. I'm not sure what the hiccup is.
The software upgrade that
We're working with Oracle right now. So what Supervisor Hanson's referring to is that Oracle has, we were going to deploy on version 12 of their software. In the middle of that deployment, Oracle said, you can't deploy on 12 anymore. You need to stop what you're doing on 12 and go to 13. We're not going to let you stay on 12 any longer. We're working with Cherry Road, who's our implementer right now, to figure out how that's gonna look and how that's gonna work, because it's really not their fault and it's not our fault. But there could be implications of delaying the project because of the version 13 rollout, which is being forced upon us. So, stay tuned.
Any other questions? Supervisor Brinkman.
Can you refresh my memory? What is the cost of the ERP license per year?
The software renewal costs?
Yeah. Or what is the whole package they're gonna cost us again?
I think it was a $3 million package with implementation and licensing.
Okay.
And then the annual renewals, I'm not positive. 283,000.
Does that stay flat, and for how many years is that?
5 years, I believe.
5 years, and is it flat?
For five. Yep.
Then it's renegotiated?
There's a built-in incremental for another 5, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Not
Well, I'd
seeing
like to
any?
thank you for your continued support of the IT department. I got here 4 years ago, and the IT department was a little neglected back then. We've brought a lot of changes in here. It's made people a lot more productive, and we look forward to maintaining those systems. Thanks again.
Thank you, John. Our next one is our Facilities Department, Jim Ellsbury.
Good evening. I see the lights are all on, so I'm doing good. It's kind of funny. I'll be here 5 years in 5 days, which takes me back to Andy Brinkman over here, the facility director that's been here for 6 months. And here we are, Andy, 4.5 months later, or 4.5 years later. Thank you for remembering. We've done great things this past year. Very busy with the CBRF, the nursing home, so on and so forth. We've gotten involved with the DD building. It kind of gets me a little choked up a little bit because when we did the DD building, the medical examiner needed a place to go for families and so on and so forth to deal with the deaths in the county. And we kind of knew what we were doing, you know, kind of making a building nice. And then we had a death in the county where families came in from Mexico and other parts of the world to see their loved ones that had passed away in a horrible accident. And when you think about the little piece you play in these things, when you're doing it, you're thinking it's a building, we're going to make it look nice. But then when it's actually touching families and the families come back and they're complimentary about the work we did, that just kind of puts it all in a nice little package for us. And it makes a difference in our lives because what we do is we give as much as we possibly can to the county and our work ethic and our projects. And it's nice to have that happen where somebody notices from far away. So thank you to everybody for providing us the ability to do what we do in a way that's actually pleasing to members of the community from other nations, and then also for the employees here. It's been fabulous. I have a full report here. If there's questions, I'm more than willing to answer them.
Any questions? Is it Dr. Off?
Just a quick one. On page 13, how come the revenue for 2018 is only like a third of what it was for 2017? What's causing that difference?
For revenue in my department, we're pretty much 100% levy-based. It's Ken again, so we'll have to. Oh, there we go. Thank you. What was happening is we were taking responsibility for the fuel. We were ordering it, we were billing other departments, so on and so forth. It's all been moved to finance because finance was also taking care of the purchase and the distribution. So we went ahead and moved everything up to finance. So that would be the difference, Judy. Yep, no problem.
Any other questions? Supervisor Tatum.
Yeah, I have a question about, it says that the department has reached out to, with the local school districts, municipalities, to do some contract sharing and cost-saving initiatives. I'm wondering if you could just give some examples of that.
Sure. We use, well, for instance, the fuel, while we're on that subject. The school district comes over and fuels up their vehicles here. So when we can buy more fuel, the price is a little bit better for us. We've tried to work with some of the other communities to get them to come in, and for whatever reason, they haven't yet. I started an association in September called WIFMA. It's the Wisconsin Facility Management Association. Right now, we've got a third of all the counties in the state are members. So we're doing pretty good from starting since September. That alliance has brought in for sustainability. I was just at a demonstration today of a solar panel, and then also looked at Bush's Baked Beans, which I didn't know was in Augusta, Wisconsin, but huge plant there. And I just saw a rather large digester in that place. So what happens with all this is by bringing everybody together, we're learning best practices. We didn't know that solar panels were affected like I am from pollen. So they do get a little bit of a mist on them, and it does reduce how much solar electric is put out. So they're going to start cleaning a section of it and determining if the clean section, just to see the delta between the pollinated section and the clean section. So through the association and through, CISA 10 is where we buy our gas. It's cheaper than what we can get through Excel. Through the association, we're looking to start maybe getting into our own contracting so that we can save more money on the gas and so on and so forth. The sustainability part is brewing across the state, and we're all kind of talking to our boards about sustainability, solar, or whatever the case may be. So we're kind of like bringing it all together, and it's helping because you're getting the same kind of conversation from me as you would somebody else. So.
Any other questions? Supervisor Hanson.
This is not meant to be a gotcha kind of thing, but on page 13, number I, issues, concerns, and restraints, there's nothing listed. Has to be a typo.
I live in a world of bliss.
Okay. Denial. There you go.
That would be a river in Egypt.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Actually, at this point, we all have concerns and restraints. It would be redundant for me to put something on there that you already know already. I mean, you know what they are. So.
Throw me a bone. What's your biggest red flag in the next couple of months?
A couple months is trying to get through. I have one of my best staff members retiring. He's been here 33 years. Gary Moe from the nursing home. The guy's phenomenal. So it's going to be filling those shoes of these experienced workers. And that just happened this past week, so it couldn't be on there because you need more. But it's finding the skill sets and finding that character of person that can fill those shoes.
Any other questions? None? Thank you, Jim.
Thank you all.
We'll move on to Health and Human Services. Fred Johnson.
Thank you, Board Chair and Supervisors, for the opportunity to provide a brief presentation tonight. I look back at my summary of my presentation I did last year, and I highlighted some trends. And I plan to follow suit tonight, but I plan to highlight one trend. If you take a moment and look at page 19, I think it might be packet page 33 in your board packet. Has to do primarily with substance abuse and the impact this is having on the number of children that we are seeing in need of services, and the impact in regards to placements, such as foster care. So if you look at the top of that page, you'll see the dramatic increase from 2013 to 2017. The number of children that experienced a placement episode went from 23 to 71. Our number of child protection services reports that we receive continue to go up, and the number of screened-in cases continue to go up, as well as our ongoing cases. I went back and took a quick look at a couple of other point-in-time references, one in March of 2018, which was a discussion with the Health and Human Services Board, and at that time we had 68 children in placement, again, point in time. Fast forward to May of 2018, we had 77 children in placement. Again, across the spectrum of the type of services that you see on the top of page 19, and then I think again it's packet page 33. Still very high when we're comparing this when we look back just a few years. What are we doing? The County Board of Supervisors authorized new positions. So we have our additional foster care coordinator hired. We have an additional assessment worker hired. In November of 2017, we completed our transition and training of our 3 in-home therapists from multi-systemic therapy to family-centered therapy. That was completed in November of 2017. Their caseloads are full as of today. We just this week filled a vacant substance abuse counselor position that was approved in 2008 for the 2018 budget. And that individual will start working with, at least in part, with the family-centered treatment team to work to embed substance abuse treatment services as part of that team, which is not currently part of the team design. There's also the FCT Foundation has a grant through, I believe it's the Duke Endowment, where they're looking to do research on embedding substance abuse treatment with the FCT model. So we're hoping that we can, with this substance abuse counselor, piggyback, if you will, on some of that research that's happening currently. Locally, we're working with the St. Croix County, the United Way of St. Croix Valley. They're part of our foster care recruitment team. They, along with some other individuals, will be working again as a team to work towards bringing individuals that are interested in providing foster care for those youth that families have been disrupted, again, primarily what we're seeing due to methamphetamine and some opioid issues, abuse issues as well. We're doing outreach with our partners, the United Way, to look at funding opportunities of how we may be able to increase substance abuse services as part of our FCT team. We're exploring with local partners some grant opportunities for earlier intervention. Have a meeting this Friday to look at possibilities about how we might be able to intervene earlier and do some prevention activities and work. I know that our CJCC, our Community Justice Collaborating Council, is meeting in July to do some strategic planning, and I'm hopeful that substance abuse and the impact not only on health and human services, but other systems within the county, law enforcement, district attorney, courts, et cetera, may also be part of that planning process, and how can we as a system potentially prioritize this issue and work together to solve this problem. Part of the professional association that I belong to is working on a caseload study. And for those of you that are planning to attend the Wisconsin County Association Conference, I would encourage you to consider participating in a breakout session. I believe Jason Witt, who is the Director of Human Services in La Crosse County, will be providing a presentation. Jason's very well versed on the topic of the caseload study, caseload standards, caseload ratios, as well as working on a funding methodology that I believe will be part of our association and WCA's legislative priorities. There's other things that we're doing, but it's not my intent tonight to highlight this one community issue at the expense of all the other services that are provided by Health and Human Services. But I highlighted this at County Board in January of 2018 and described this as part of a presentation that was done to the Speaker's Task Force on foster care in La Crosse in September of 2017. And words like crisis, unprecedented, child welfare agencies are struggling. This crisis is taking a toll on child welfare workers. Not to mention the path we're on is, in my estimation and my concern, is unsustainable, and some counties are seeing those costs as being unsustainable, burning through fund balances, et cetera. So again, there's a lot of information in our report. I'd be happy to set aside time with any county board supervisor that would like to spend time talking about other divisions. But given the brief time tonight that I had to present. I wanted to highlight one issue that I think is one that we have to solve collectively as a community. While this is a Health and Human Services report, this is not a specific Health and Human Services problem and/or issue. So with that, if there are questions, I would be happy to take them. Otherwise, again, I would offer the opportunity to sit down with anybody to review more details if you would like to do that.
Any questions? Supervisor Schoberg?
Are you hearing any positive news from the state as far as, because this isn't just our county problem. We probably have access to some resources that other counties don't. But it's a statewide concern. Is there movement that you're hearing in the legislative sessions? I know they're closed for this year, but is there a promise of anything coming up next year?
In the last biennial budget, there was an increase of $5 million per year for our base allocation. That equaled about $40,000 or $50,000 for St. Croix County. I think that's a good start. The good news is that we have Department of Health Services staff that are participating in helping on the caseload study work group. So I see there's movement in that respect. In terms of working with legislators, we're hoping that by August or September, the proposal will be in its final form, and then we can take the issue to legislators in more detail. But we did have conversation here with legislators at the Attorney General's Law Enforcement Roundtable, and these issues were discussed. And certainly there was, in my opinion, positive response to the needs of the local counties. And again, not just St. Croix, but this is a statewide, if not a national issue.
Any other questions? Supervisor Akhtarov?
Yeah, I have, well, a comment and a question. The comment is, would it be okay, like next year, if you gave us some idea what an average caseload is supposed to be? I realize each case is unique. Some cases may take immensely more time than others, but I mean, you're giving us a caseload and some are going up, some are going down, but I have no idea how that compares to what is recommended.
That's part of the caseload study work group. I'd be happy to provide that information. And they're looking at different models that are out there, and it's really broken into there's two ways that states and or counties have approached this. One is caseload, the second is workload. Workload gets a little more complicated when you look at the details of what might be needed in a particular case A versus case B. But caseload standards have been out there and available for quite some time. I happen to be part of the advisory committee for the caseload standard work group. Julie Krings, our administrator in Children's Services, is actually on one of the tech teams. So there's two components, caseload standards as well as developing a sustaining funding mechanism. And I think Supervisor Achterhoff, the last time this presentation was provided, you highlighted the difference in Milwaukee County funding versus the balance of the state. And I think if you get an opportunity to participate in the presentation that Jason will provide at WCA, you'll get a little bit more information about that, if not there, at maybe one of the Health and Human Services Board meetings to come.
Okay. And my one question was, on page 27, what does the county do anything? Because you had the wait time for mental health patients and alcohol drug treatment. What does the county do during the wait time? Does it do anything?
We always prioritize individuals in terms of service delivery, but we've offered what we've referred to as a stabilization group.
Okay.
That gives people the opportunity to come in for services that are pre-treatment. We also work with local providers, and we, in our behavioral health division, have spent a lot of time doing outreach to other providers that are interested in coming into the area, providing data. We would certainly welcome more providers, particularly with regard to substance abuse, but we'll work with other resources and agencies that are out there with those individuals as well. But sometimes people do wait.
Any other questions? Supervisor Nordstrand?
I was struck by that chart as well, the wait times, and I see that they are coming down to some degree for alcohol and other drug abuse as sort of the beginning of the problem, the foster children in some sense being the result of some of this. What are they waiting for? In other words, what is the, if you wait in December of 17, 89 days, is it, describe for me what the process is. Somebody with an alcohol problem calls the county hotline and says, I need help. What are they waiting for? Waiting for an appointment with a substance abuse counselor? Or I'd like to get it down to the person and understand what's happening here.
Primarily, that's a wait for an outpatient counselor to be available to provide ongoing services. I don't believe that that wait time reflects somebody calling for an assessment, who then might be steered towards a stabilization group if they so chose. But I believe that's outpatient services only, and I can verify that. So they're waiting to see a counselor.
And so when they do see a counselor, what is it that the county regularly will provide to someone in need? Someone who, say, is an alcoholic?
Well, there could be a variety of services, and that might get into the weeds a bit, where I might need to bring in one of our substance abuse counselors to provide more detail, or do a more detailed review of the services that are provided. But it's outpatient services. There could be some inpatient opportunities as well. But again, I didn't prepare for that level of detail for tonight.
The one comment I'll make on this is I'm in recovery for more than 10 years, and I can tell you, as an alcoholic, a recovered alcoholic, the idea of having to wait 90 days for anything, alcoholics don't wait 10 minutes for something, much less 90 days. So I think that was really a striking statistic for me in terms of being effective. You know, we have to wait 90 days to provide something to a drug addict or an alcoholic. That is not a program that is functional, really. I mean, not for the people that are in need. Now, I don't know what the constraints are. You know, obviously there are lots of constraints, but I'm just saying, as now not in my supervisor role, in my recovered alcoholic role, 90 days waiting for something is not anything. So anyway, I'll be wanting to talk to you more about that.
Yeah, and I would, again, if you go back to packet page 10, it provides a summary of the various programs, highlights what we provide with regard to outpatient services, assessment, diagnostic services, individual chemical dependency, et cetera. It's all written. But I hear your message, and I'd be happy to have more conversation about that wait time. It has to do with staffings. One of the staffing levels, and in the presentation I provided with regard to children's services, I highlighted we just hired a substance abuse counselor that was authorized by the County Board of Supervisors in the budgeting process in November, and it took till just this week, I believe, on Monday, that person started. So we're trying to bring the resources in. We're trying to work with other providers to put a dent in that wait list so people aren't waiting 90 days, doing assessments quickly, having stabilization groups as an opportunity so people aren't just waiting. But be happy to have more of a conversation, and I could bring in our substance abuse supervisor as well as our behavioral health administrator to give you more detail.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you, Fred.
Thank you.
We'll move on with our agenda. The County Administrator's report. We'll turn it over to Pat Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are two items this evening. One is the monthly financial reports, which are in your packet. They look slightly different than the monthly financial reports that you've seen in the past. This is a product of the new ERP system. It's categorized into the standing committee or the oversight committees for those departments: administrative, community development, public protection, health and human services, and transportation. It starts with revenues, provides some detail. Fiscal year 16, 17, budget 18, year-to-date 18 for revenues, and then expenditures.
And this represents financial activity through the end of April of 2018. Also in your packets in the future will be a continuation of the CIP summary. Did not make this month's packet, but in future packets it will. It'll include the summary of where we're at with the capital improvement projects. Ken Witt is the interim finance director. He worked hard on getting these reports put together. They're starting to roll out in front of the standing committees. We've taken some feedback from staff, department heads, and some county board supervisors with feedback from the various committees, and we're trying to incorporate those suggestions into these monthly reports. They are a work in progress, and we'll continue to fine tune and refine these as we move forward throughout the year. But this is kind of the basis of how these reports will be put together. Ken is here to answer any questions that you might have regarding the new format for the reports. And then if there aren't any questions about these monthly reports, the second part of my report, I've asked Ken to provide a brief update to the county board on the ERP project. It came up briefly in John Allegro's annual report for IT. It was a big project, big undertaking, represents significant change for our organization, change that we haven't undertaken in many, many years in how we report our financial activity, and also incorporating the human resources side of the financial system and trying to incorporate these two together. So Ken, if you would come to the podium, please, and maybe give a brief update on where we're at with the ERP.
Any questions first on the financial statements?
Judy?
Yeah, okay, I mean, it's really different, and it really would be nice if there was some kind of an explanation for all of us. Because one thing, at least, I mean, I started going through it and I lost, but like, on the first page, the treasurer, I mean, revenues for the treasurers, like 60-something in 16, 75-something in 17, 78-something in 18, but for some reason, year-to-date, it's over 2 million. How, I mean, there's no and that's happening a lot in all of these, and I don't understand it.
So part of the thing that we need to get used to with this transition from the old system to the new system is that we've also changed our chart of accounts, and we've changed where things flow to. So a really good example is the very top line on that report that's showing on the screen right now. It's general revenues, and you see it's general and then default. So default was uncategorized things in prior years. In the old system, we didn't allocate it to a department. In the new system, we allocate everything to a department, so you know who's responsible, so you can go ask them a question if there's something that needs to be answered. So 30 million in 2016 and 25 million in 2017 of uncategorized revenues. Those are mostly property taxes is what it is. But now we allocate that to a department, and so you're seeing that hit under the county treasurer, because the county treasurer claimed the property taxes, since they're the one collecting it.
Supervisor Hanson.
So the unallocated fund balance, does that reflect in that?
Nope, this is not reflective of fund balance at all. This is, these reports are just revenues and expenses.
Any other questions? Supervisor Long?
Would that also be true under the expenses, the general unallocated 1.3 or 1.4 million? Same
Yep.
type of situation?
It's the same thing. When you see large balances in 16, 17, you're not seeing them in 17, or all of a sudden new things are appearing in 17 and they weren't in 16, 17. It's a change in the flow from the old system to the new system of where transactions are posting. And so the old year's datas are going to be less comparable until we get a couple years into the new system, and that consistency for reporting is reflective. And so I understand that there's going to be some frustration over that because it makes things hard to compare from last year to this year. All I can tell you is that time fixes those issues.
Supervisor Ackerman.
Just one with, I mean, I've only been on the county board for 4 years. This is my 5th. And this is, I believe, at least the 3rd do-over. I mean, how are we supposed to do our job if it gets changed so often and it's hard to understand? I mean, when we get the budget, it's going to be a whole new format again. It's frustrating.
Yes. And your sentiment is the same sentiment we get from a lot of staff that are having to learn their jobs over with the new system also. But it is change, but the change we hope is for the better. You're going to notice that these reports are longer. There's a lot more detail. And this is being shown to you really at one of the highest levels. They actually get a whole lot longer. This could be a 100-page report if you wanted to see all of the details behind it. So the benefit of the new system, while it is different, is more comprehensive. There's more information there. And you can take any of these blocks, because we broke it into the 5 standing committees, go back to their packets, and their standing committee reports have more detail in them. They have the summary at the beginning, which will match this, and then they'll have further detail. So if you see something that you want to drill further into, that's the first place you can go to, is that standing committee's packet from the prior month, and you're going to be able to see that detail. So yes, it is different. Yes, it will take a little getting used to, but hopefully we're providing you with more information and better information so that you can do your job better.
Any other? Supervisor Brinkman?
Ken, so we're done with the account numbers? I mean, that, I kind of like that. Are we done with those, is what you're saying?
With having the numbers on the reports
Yeah.
instead of the words?
Yeah.
Well, I can do it either way. Do you have a preference?
It's one of those things that in my mind, now I know what I'm looking at after doing this for 7 years. But I'll shut up.
Yeah. Well, these reports are completely customized, so I can make them show whatever you want to see. The numbers are going to be whatever's in the system, but if you want numbers instead of words, I can do that too.
Supervisor Schoberg?
But we did change all the numbers.
Well, I echo the frustration, but I also want to be part of a solution. So you might not even know what we want to see. I mean, I think what Supervisor Ochterhoff wants, and new administrative chair, he'll have to know all this, Dave Peterson, is just an agreed upon, thought through process of revealing this to us so that we're not stumbling over this stuff. So there needs to be a study group of supervisors that meet with you and figure out how this is going to be laid out most effectively for our purposes, I think. And I think it's up to perhaps the administration committee, which oversees the finance department, to be the ones that go to the front lines with you and try to get this done. So, Chair Peterson, you're number one. I being the vice chair, I think I probably have to participate too, and maybe we should have a couple other people if Supervisor Ochterhoff wants to join in, or anybody else that wants to understand the numbers deep down, and then we could be resources to the rest of you to explain it too. So I just like to make that proposal that we give Ken feedback so he doesn't come back next time and again, he's frustrated because it's not what we were expecting. So we have 2 months now before our next meeting, and it'd be nice to have this in place by then, and that'd be a nice objective. So, okay. Chair, if you'd like to see this happen, why don't you suggest that some of us supervisors who are willing to have a sit-down, in-depth meeting and get into the weeds with Ken and see what this system can do?
So we'll leave it up to I think I'll leave it up to the admin committee to set that up. So I'll see Chair Peterson to do that and check out the people you'd like to have on that committee. Any other questions? So go ahead.
Yeah, have them forward their name to me, and then we'll go over the list, and we'll come up with them.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Not seeing any? Thank you. We'll move back to
ERP. Yep.
ERP.
That was just answering questions on the financials. Now I'm going to tell you about the ERP system.
Don't even get into that.
Thank you, Chairman Larson and supervisors. So the ERP system, so the ERP is Enterprise Resource Planning. That's what the system is. We spent $3 million on this system. It has an annual maintenance fee of $283,000, like John Allegro was saying. And so what does that do for us? Well, the ERP is our financial system. So it does, it pays all our bills for us. It processes the checks and direct deposits. We receive all of the money into the system. We calculate payroll, distribute payroll, and pay taxes with that. We do all of the budgeting through this ERP system. All of the reports that you're seeing are coming out of the ERP system. It also then ties in, though, the human resource components. It ties in timesheets, so tracking of employees' time worked, the amount of time off that they have accrued and that they're keeping track of. It does benefit selections, so employees will be making their annual benefit selections into the system instead of a paper process. It does the performance reviews. They're done through the system, so that's all tracked and attached to those employees' files. It's tracking employee training, so it has a training component. So those trainings that the employees are required to take and do take are tracked with that employee file. So it's a compilation of really finance and HR functions, all tied into this one system. So where we were before we got to this system was we were operating off of our legacy system, which was called Alio. We'd been on that system for at least 20 years, and that was basically the financial system and payroll. We had NeoGov, which we were doing our recruitment and selection for. This system replaces that. We had Halogen, which we were doing our performance reviews on. That was a separate system. This system will replace that. We have 2 or 3 different timesheet softwares that integrate into our payroll, some better than others. This system will replace those. And then we also had a lot of external spreadsheets that we were keeping track of things. So this system is going to replace nearly all of those also. So while we do have $283,000 in ongoing costs, some of that is offset by being able to get rid of the NeoGov contract, the Halogen contract. So those are small compared to the 283, but there is some cost offset there. So it's a comprehensive system replacing everything. So what happened was a few years ago, we started the multi-year process of evaluating the projects. We got the GFOA involved. They sat down with us, determined what software options were out there, what the software packages on the market today could do for us. They helped us through the bidding process. We bid the project out. We had several bids on it, and we selected Cherry Road to implement the Oracle system. So we're about 3/4 of the way through that implementation phase right now. We went live on January 1 with the financials. So all the bills are being paid out of the new system. All the cash receipts are going into the new system. We still have additional steps that need to be taken with phase 2. And phase 2 had originally been planned to go live on July 1. So that's not going to happen. We're going to go live with part of it still on July 1, but the other part, the HCM, which is the human resource side and the payroll side, is going to get pushed back to between late October and December 16th. Somewhere in between there is when our new go live date will be for those components. There's probably 2 reasons for that. One is it was a fairly aggressive schedule to hit July 1, we think, now working through that process. And 2, probably the bigger reason, was the Oracle change from version 12 to version 13 hit right at the time when we needed to start testing. And so we couldn't test on 12 and then go live on 13. You had to test on 13. But we're in the process now of converting to the 13 so that we can start that testing. So that really ate up about 1.5 to 2 months of our time right here at this time of the year. which pushed that go-live date back. So December 16th, go-live, that's the date that we ended up picking, which is probably the more likely scenario, gives us the first payroll in January on the new system. So that makes it easy because there's no beginning balances for payroll then. So the payroll staff is happy about that. So what will still happen though is we're going to go live with the budgeting on July 1. So that's on track. And you'll be happy that the budgeting actually looks a lot like last year's. So it doesn't look nearly as different as maybe these financial reports do to the prior financial reports. So that's going to be live. We're going to finish up the version 13 conversion probably late July. And so that's internal changes. That's nothing external that you're going to see, but that's a lot of staff time that's going into that right now because the whole system has to be retested every time they have a major software upgrade. So that's happening at the same time as we're finishing all of our data conversion and process setups for the human resource and the payroll side. Staff has been working a lot of hours. Is a lot enough to say? Yeah. HR has really been working a lot of hours to get all of the information to Cherry Road so it's built into the new system. So we're at the point now where we've given them pretty much all of the information. They're assembling it, and we're going to go into testing. So we're looking at doing the testing in the new system in September. And if that's successful, then we'll be ready for the go live, you know, in that October to December timeframe. And so that's where we're at with the project. Any questions on it?
Any questions? Supervisor Long?
Do you know what the most current version of Oracle is? Is it 13?
13 is the most current version of Oracle.
Okay, because a lot of times there'll be multiple versions, excuse me, available, and you wouldn't necessarily, you could advance to a newer one, so you don't have to, not required to upgrade at a certain point later on. But
Yeah.
that doesn't sound like that's the case.
So Oracle has changed their philosophy just in the last few months. So they have no more major upgrades. 13 is their last major upgrade. And then they're actually going to 18 ABCD, which will be quarterly coming out every year. So they're actually on 18 A or B right now. And then, so you'll get quarterly updates to the system rather than major version upgrades. So correct, and that's part of the reason that it threw a monkey wrench into everything is because previously you could elect when you made that major upgrade. So the idea had been that we were going to do the version 12 implementation and that we would elect to do the version 13 after everything was live and ready to go. Oracle said, no, that's not an option anymore because we want to go to these quarterlies. So everyone has to go to 13 right now so that we can start the quarterly updates.
Any other questions? Supervisor Federling?
Yeah, oh, excuse me, just to clarify, so what is the start date of these new reports as far as the data?
Yep, so these new reports were set to go live on July 1. So we're actually running them through the test system. We actually pull the data from the live financials into the reporting in the test environment, and then we're running them. So the information that's presented today, I think, is through April, through the end of April, is the time period that it's being reported.
From the beginning of the year through April?
Yep. So we run, our fiscal year is a calendar year. So we'll generally always present our reports as year-to-date reports through the end of the month, the most recent month.
Okay.
It's available.
So one of the categories on the top here, for example, in admin is still a default in 2018. So that means that there'll still be some funds or whatever that'll go into a default that they don't have an assigned category. Is that correct?
No.
Okay.
So what that tells me is there's a mistake.
Okay.
Somebody entered something wrong. And that happened quite a bit, especially right away in January.
Okay.
People were used to entering things the old way, and they didn't necessarily get entered into the correct place. So if you look through this report, like you can see register and probate has $28 there, and there's no other dollar amounts anywhere on that row. That's probably just somebody coded something wrong.
Okay.
And so we do have quite a few of those out there, and we'll be going through and cleaning those up, but that default one will go away.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
we'll move on to our business items then. We've got a couple things here I'd like to put in front of the board here. Item 2 and 3, we'd like to move 3 up to 2, because if we approve this resolution amending the personal policy manual, it'll take care of the number 2. We won't have to worry about that one, because this, by taking care of the number 3 first. And then our number 4 is on the agenda incorrectly, and it should have been an ordinance or a resolution, should have been an ordinance. So we can't act on that one tonight, so it'll be sent back to committee and come back to our August meeting to take care of that one. If that's all right with everybody, if I see any problems, is that all right? And we'll move forward on this. Number 1 is the resolution authorizing the signing of annexation petition from the town of Star Prairie to the city of New Richmond. Do I have a motion to approve? Supervisor Peterson, Supervisor Brinkman, seconds. And Supervisor Peterson, you want to discuss that one?
You know, what occurred is there was a purchase of the farmland property up there, and then it was sold. And they want to annex it to New Richmond for future development. Along with that is a small plot cemetery, which is ours, and there's a regulation in the New Richmond regulations that will not allow them to create an island with an annexation. So our little plot needs also to be annexed to New Richmond in order to meet the legality of it, for lack of a better term. And New Richmond has agreed to do this for us if we agree to it at no cost to the county. So that the committee recommendation is that we go ahead and sign off on the annexation.
Okay. Supervisor Brinkman, can you second that?
Yeah, I second that.
Yeah,
I
we
just
haven't
wanted to
put it
say
on the
that
board
this
yet.
is literally a cemetery right in the middle of a cornfield. And as someone that has farmed that land before, it comes up on you rather quickly at night that there is this little cemetery in the middle of a field. So it really is in the middle of nowhere in a field.
It is. Any other discussion? Supervisor Osterling?
At our admin meeting, there was some discussion in regard to the future maintenance of that plot and if that would still fall back on the county. And I'm not sure, was that ever resolved?
Through the discussion, the representative from New Richmond, Roy, had made the comment that maybe it could all be, if they elected to take over, but time constraints, we didn't have enough time to do that. The purchase agreement they'd like to go ahead with, so we can. That's not to say that we cannot look at that at a later date.
Any other discussion? Questions? Not seeing any. We have a motion and a second on the floor. We'll vote. One no, the rest yes. Okay. Now we'll move on to the resolution amending personnel policy manual, position category. I'll need a motion to approve that. Supervisor, do I have a motion to approve that? The one resolution amending the personnel policy manual. Supervisor Peterson, do I have a second? Supervisor Motatum, second that one. Any discussion on that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll just,
You know,
little brief.
Give us a brief description.
Brief
of that.
background. This is a
request to modify the personnel handbook, allowing for, upon the recommendation of the Human Resources Director and the county administrator, working with department heads to temporarily reallocate staff positions within a department if there is no fiscal budgetary impact to the department. For example, the agenda item that preceded this agenda item was to take one of the seasonal park attendant positions and temporarily retitle the position, reclassify it as a seasonal groundskeeper position to be able to assist the Community Development Department in fulfilling the seasonal needs for the parks. The department head, Alan Oaks, was unable to accomplish this. There are other examples in the Health and Human Services Department where temporary reallocation of staff positions within the budget year are not allowed. This policy revision would allow the county administrator, with the recommendation of the Human Resources Director, to create temporary positions and temporarily reallocate personnel within the confines of the existing budget. In other words, if it requires additional resources or additional dollars to fund that temporary position, it would still require a budget amendment because it would exceed the budgeted authority of that department head. If the request is something that would become permanent or recommended to the board to become permanent, it would then become a budget recommendation the following year. Say, for example, if that temporary position in the Health and Human Services Department were to be recommended then as a permanent position, it would come before you as a new position request in the 2019 budget. If this groundskeeper position in the Community Development Department is one that we want to continue on into next year, that would become a position request or a reclassification request in the 2019 budget. So if this policy revision is approved by the board as recommended by the administration committee, it then would make the agenda item that preceded it moot or unnecessary. That's why there was the revision in the order of the agenda. If this agenda item is approved, then I would recommend you either take no action on the next agenda item or you postpone it indefinitely.
Any questions? Any discussion? Supervisor Schober.
Just to add this comment, whenever there's a change in the personnel policy, the administration committee always wants to make sure that the staff advisory committee has had a chance to review it in advance, and they have, and they haven't voiced any remaining continuing objections or concerns. So I guess if there's a problem with it, we would have heard about it.
It basically provides a little more flexibility to department heads and the administration to make modest temporary adjustments to personnel staffing levels within the department on a temporary basis. And if those changes would be recommended to become permanent, it would come before the board in the next year's budget cycle, basically. Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions? Not seeing any, we'll vote on the motion second on the floor. That was all yeses. And if it's all right with the board, we will skip the number 2, if that's all right with everybody. And we will skip number 4, and I will send that back to committee, the Community Development Committee, to come back as an ordinance for our August meeting, if that's all right with everybody. Supervisor Hanson.
My understanding is it does not need to go back to the committee. It just needs to be refined and then come back to the county board. Is that right, Councilor?
Yep,
That's correct.
okay. Now we're open for future agenda items. Anybody have any future agenda items they want to bring forward? If not, if you have any to bring forward, just bring them forward to myself or Pat or Cindy. Bring them up to us. Thank you. County Clerk's report? Nothing from the County Clerk. Any announcements? Supervisor Long?
If possible, could we get an update on the status of District 13?
I didn't catch that, I'm sorry.
An update on the status of District 13, just so we're aware, if possible?
Sure. I don't think this is a policy issue, so there have been a number of preliminary matters before the court, number of scheduling conferences. The matter set for a hearing on June 26, I believe at 8:30 a.m., in which 9 a.m., I'm sorry. If you get there at 8:30, you'll be a little early. 9 a.m., in which it's scheduled for a half-day hearing, and after that, we expect a decision from Judge Vlack.
Any other announcements? Not seeing any. Thank you, everyone. Our meeting's adjourned.